Good morning, everyone. My name is Joseph Scalia, and I'm scheduled to speak to you today for 15 minutes about city violence or black on black violence. And before I get into that, let me give you a little bit way of a background. First, I'd like to thank Bart and Jacob for inviting me to speak. I appreciate it. Number two, let me give you a little bit of background about myself and why I know a little bit about this. I'm a criminal defense attorney in Las Vegas. I practiced in Las Vegas for 20 years. I also have a degree in economics. And that combination of economics and the law degree sort of allows me to see things in a different way. And I moved back to Baltimore just as violence began to break out. And everyone got on TV and they began to talk about, quote, senseless violence. I wrote an op-ed piece for the Baltimore Sun, and actually it's up behind me. It says, "Blame city violence on the drug war." And before I get into that, I want to sort of get into this thing. This, quote, black on black violence that everyone is lamenting about. Then we have Black Lives Matter, which is police, brutality and arresting people. Now there's this other thread running around, which is the paramilitary operations of the police, kicking in doors, all dressed in black, using shock and stun grenades as they kick in doors, stopping people on the sides of the road, these sort of like police state tactics. All of these threads seem to be disjointed, seem to be unrelated, but in fact they are all related, and they're all related to one thing, which is the war on drugs. The war on drugs is creating a lot of these side issues as a result of this basically illogical war. And why I say illogical is because I have an economics background. You have a supply and a demand. And what I'm talking about here applies to all of these social problems. And people get on TV and they scratch their heads and they say, well, why are all these terrible things happening? These terrible things are happening because of the war on drugs. Let me get back to this piece I wrote for the Blame the City Violence on the Drug War. Basically what I say is it is not just Baltimore. Baltimore isn't the only city that has this plague of violence. It's in all major cities in the United States, which means it is a national problem. And my theory is very simple. This violence is not senseless. It makes complete and total sense from an economic analysis. Why is that? And this is my quote. Violence is the currency in an underground economic system that we as a society have created. It has nothing to do with poverty, race, social status, or the availability of guns. And why do I say that? It's a market. When drugs are made illegal, and the example I use in Baltimore is the heroin trade. It's estimated to be approximately 19,000 heroin addicts in Baltimore City alone. A $50 a day habit is generating almost $1 million a day in cash, tax-free. Now, if you are a drug dealer or in the drug business, it is just like any other business. It's a big business. And when you have a big business where you're distributing a good, you have a supply chain. You need a reliable supplier. You need to have reliable distribution points. You need to have reliable people out on the street to account for it and sell it. And at the end of the day, all the books have got to balance out. Now, if any one of these people involved in this business rips you off, you can't sue them. You can't say, I was supposed to get a kilo of heroin and it was cut. So what is the tool to regulate that is violence. You can't advertise. A good way to gain that market share when you can't advertise in an unregulated market is violence. If you can control all the corners in a particular area, guess what? You have a monopoly. Violence serves as an effective mechanism. And the way I put it is, it's an effective mechanism to ensure the market participants adhere to the customs of the trade. It is an unwritten rule or unwritten code that if you rip somebody off, you might get shot. They can't call the police. They can't file a complaint against you. So these murders and shootings aren't senseless from an economic point of view. Now, if you expand that even further, this violence, black on black violence that people are calling it, is just really a small piece of the puzzle, because there's another part of the puzzle. And the other part of the puzzle is the police interaction. Police are trained now to think everybody they pull over is a well-armed suspect. They say, why is that? Because of the drug trade, because of the guns involved, and all of those things. There's only one way to fix all of these problems, and it's very simply, I just lost my spot here, ending the war on drugs. The war on drugs, like any other system, and I've actually referred to this in my on my Facebook page, is all of this, we've been down this road before. We've been down this road before back in the 20s with the prohibition. But in those days, during the 20s, it was gangs of Italians, Jews, and the Irish. They were shooting each other. And if you don't believe me, go to the go look up Wikipedia and look at what happened at the St. Paddy's Day Massacre. At the St. Paddy's Day Massacre, I mean, Al Capone's gang basically stole a police car. I mean, you talk about a crime being out of control. Back in the day, you know, they stole a police car, they stole uniforms, they showed up at, quote, whose house did they show up to? They didn't just show up at some random business. It was one of their competitors' alcohol distribution facilities. They had some sort of scam set up, and they said, oh, we got this really good product, let's deliver it to you. And who shows up at the gang dressed as police? The opposing gang, thinking it was just a routine raid, they just put their hands up, put their hands on the wall, cooperating, and Al Capone's gang pulls out a machine gun and guns them all down. Now, in those days, you know, people were running around, we're going to stop this crime, we're going to stop this violence. The violence during the Prohibition did stop. And it stopped when the 23rd Amendment was passed and alcohol was no longer illegal. Not too long after that, guess what became illegal? Marijuana, and they started these wars on drugs. And the wars on drugs are a failure. And one of the reasons I say it's a failure is it hasn't worked. I mean, drugs are more available in the history of the country, and the side effects of that are many. If you get on TV and you get on social media, we have all of these sort of threads which are hanging out there, and they're all related. America's cities are, if you've traveled around the world, you realize America's inner cities are slums. They're for the richest country in the world, it's reprehensible. Why? Because the war on drug does a couple things. Number one is it makes drugs expensive. I mean, basically marijuana, which is a plant that grows everywhere on the streets, are expensive. It sucks money out of the economy. And what does it do with it? It exports it primarily to foreign countries. If you think about Baltimore's drug trade, between, say, $1 million a day in coke, in heroin, that's $365 million right there. Plus you add in pot, and you add in coke, and you add in meth, and you add in the designer drugs. It's close to $1 billion a year. And you add together all the cities the size of Baltimore, and you throw in the big cities like LA and Chicago and New York. I mean, we're talking $100 billion a year in money, which is going out of the country. So let me not ramble here. This is sort of the point on it. The war, these threads that we see in our society are a reaction to this, quote, war on drugs. The war on drugs is creating bad economic incentives. It is creating violence. It is creating a militarized police department. It is creating chaos in our cities. It is creating narco states. It is creating a huge state and federal bureaucracy which serves no purpose because the drugs are plentiful. So these are the issues that we really need to talk about. And in my piece, I wrapped it up by saying it's very simple. If you want to be a civil rights hero of the next generation, what you need to do is focus on the laws which are negatively impacting, and it's not just black people, poor people who are under this thumb of the drug war. And why do I say poor people? Wealthy people know doctors. Wealthy people aren't on the street corners buying and selling drugs. Wealthy people have drugs delivered to their offices. They're not out on the streets. And as a result, they don't feel the full brunt of this war on drugs. The war on drugs is hitting primarily the poor people who use drugs, not the middle class, not the rich people. This war on drugs has decimated our Fourth Amendment rights. You can get stopped, searched by a dog, pulled out of your car. Why? All in the name of the war on drugs. So I will tell you this. This is the Future of Freedom Foundation. If you really want to fight freedom and clip back the police state, the most effective way to do it is to end this war on drugs. You will see black on black violence stop. You will see police tactics stop. You will see the confiscation of property stop. You will see the low-level crime that drug addicts do to feed their habit, the smash and grabs, the auto burglars, all that will diminish. And if you got people involved in treatment with some of that money, you will see the general quality of life in this country returning back to the way it was before this war on drugs got really burned into America's legal system. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to contact me. You can contact me at joe@thegreatbaltimorebouncback. That's joe@thegreatbaltimorebouncback.com. Or you can call me at 443-814-9514. Thank you for your attention, and thank you for inviting me to speak. And I will also put the link to the article on the YouTube feed. Thank you.